Welcome to Love and Trauma, the real deal. I'm Danielle Sebastian, best-selling author, coach, and yes, I've been through the marriage trenches myself. This show is all about how to actually deal with trauma in relationships and make it work without losing your mind. If you're ready for honest talk, no fluff, and tools that cut through the noise, tune in because let's face it, love can be a bit of a mess, but it's a mess worth figuring out. This is Love and Trauma, the real deal.
You that the way that you're approaching healing, or even the way you see your partner's trauma, might be completely backwards. What if the real key to connection isn't what you think it is? Today's episode is going to challenge everything you thought you knew about trauma and relationships. And by the time we get to the end, you're going to walk away with insights that could change the way you love forever. So stay with me. You don't want to miss a single moment. Today's episode of Love and Trauma, the Real Deal, is something really special. We're going to be diving deep into the most powerful moments from my interviews with 4 incredible trauma survivors, women who have not only faced the lasting impact of trauma in their relationships, but they have also done the healing work to build deeper connection, love, and resilience. And we can all learn something from their stories. Their stories come from and prove that healing is entirely possible, that it can change everything, and that you can create connection even in a relationship where past trauma is impacting it. So let me introduce my guests today. First, we have Cassandra Love Lambert, and she is the visionary behind Sea Love. She's a trauma-trained somatic transformational coach who went from battling complex PTSD and emotional neglect to helping others feel safe in their bodies and unlock their authentic selves. She also has her brand new book, which is launching. So I will put that in the notes. But what I really loved about talking to her was how she talked about how talk therapy isn't the only thing that you can use and do for healing, and that trauma is complex. So we really want to delve into other modalities that may be helpful. So I loved her perspective. And then we welcome Safa Pardo. She was actually my very first guest on my very first episode, and she's an embodiment and empowerment mentor. And she is dedicated to helping women reclaim their personal power. And she shows us how subconscious wounds and limiting beliefs really can keep us stuck in toxic cycles, and that self-compassion and really mastering emotions can completely change the way that we connect with others. Danette Haig is another one of my favorite interviews. She really talked about her struggle with the shame of her scars and finding self-worth and breaking free from codependency. Danette is also an author. She wrote Beauty from Ashes, Transforming Wounds into Wisdom, Scars and Stars. And her story is a true amazing testament to how people can get through any sort of trauma, come back on the other side, and even be in beauty pageants. And finally, we have Emily Clayhorn, and she also is an author, Rising from the Ashes, How to Reclaim Your Life After a Traumatic Childhood. Emily opened up about how her childhood trauma affected her relationships, how the triggers affected her being a mom, and how she's helping others, and also wanting to break the generational cycles of trauma. So these are 4 survivors, 4 incredible journeys, and one message: healing is possible, and it can transform the way you love and connect. So this is Love and Trauma, the real deal. And trust me, you don't want to miss this one. What if I told you that the way that you're approaching healing, or even the way you see your partner's trauma, might be completely backwards? What if the real key to connection isn't what you think it is? Today's episode is going to challenge everything you thought you knew about trauma and relationships. And by the time we get to the end, you're going to walk away with insights that could change the way you love forever. So stay with me. You don't want to miss a single moment. Today's episode of Love and Trauma, the Real Deal, is something really special. We're going to be diving deep into the most powerful moments from my interviews with 4 incredible trauma survivors, women who have not only faced the lasting impact of trauma in their relationships, but they have also done the healing work to build deeper connection, love, and resilience. And we can all learn something from their stories. Their stories come from and prove that healing is entirely possible, that it can change everything, and that you can create connection even in a relationship where past trauma is impacting it. So let me introduce my guests today. First, we have Cassandra Love Lambert, and she is the visionary behind Sea Love. She's a trauma-trained somatic transformational coach who went from battling complex PTSD and emotional neglect to helping others feel safe in their bodies and unlock their authentic selves. She also has her brand new book, which is launching. So I will put that in the notes. But what I really loved about talking to her was how she talked about how talk therapy isn't the only thing that you can use and do for healing, and that trauma is complex. So we really want to delve into other modalities that may be helpful. So I loved her perspective. And then we welcome Safa Pardo. She was actually my very first guest on my very first episode, and she's an embodiment and empowerment mentor. And she is dedicated to helping women reclaim their personal power. And she shows us how subconscious wounds and limiting beliefs really can keep us stuck in toxic cycles, and that self-compassion and really mastering emotions can completely change the way that we connect with others. Danette Haig is another one of my favorite interviews. She really talked about her struggle with the shame of her scars and finding self-worth and breaking free from codependency. Danette is also an author. She wrote Beauty from Ashes, Transforming Wounds into Wisdom, Scars and Stars. And her story is a true amazing testament to how people can get through any sort of trauma, come back on the other side, and even be in beauty pageants. And finally, we have Emily Clayhorn, and she also is an author, Rising from the Ashes, How to Reclaim Your Life After a Traumatic Childhood. Emily opened up about how her childhood trauma affected her relationships, how the triggers affected her being a mom, and how she's helping others, and also wanting to break the generational cycles of trauma. So these are 4 survivors, 4 incredible journeys, and one message. Healing is possible, and it can transform the way you love and connect. So this is Love and Trauma, the Real Deal, and trust me, you don't want to miss this one. Wow, what an incredible conversation. If there's one thing today's episode proves, it's that healing isn't just possible, it's powerful. Danette, Cassandra, Emily, and Safa, they brought raw honesty, deep wisdom, and practical tools that can truly change the way we approach trauma, relationships, and connection. So I'm hoping that some of you may have seen yourself in Danette's story, where learning to set boundaries and breaking free from codependency and embracing self-worth. Or Cassandra's insights helped you realize that healing isn't just about getting therapy, it's about finding what actually works for you. Emily's story showed us that our triggers don't have to be our downfall. They can be the start of deeper understanding with the people that we love. And Safa reminds us of something so important, that the way we talk about trauma and healing matters. We all have the power to create more understanding, more compassion, and more connection. And that's what this show is all about. So, what's your next step? Maybe it's having a conversation that you've been avoiding. Maybe it's looking at your own healing with fresh eyes. Or maybe it's simply just knowing that you're not alone in this journey. No matter where you are, you deserve healing, you deserve connection, and you deserve peace. Thanks for joining today.
Worse for me to stay in the same place. And I think I was very vividly aware of that, even if it was just in my subconscious. I just had been so numb, because that's the other thing that happens. It's first you have the pain and it's so intense. You really do feel like you're going to never make it. And then you just go numb. And that scared me more. The numbness, and I've had clients who felt this too. That's the scariest bit, man, because once you go numb, you really feel like you can't even love anymore, and not just yourself, I mean like anyone. So it got to the point where I was like, it's either this or there is no life to be lived. It was really hard. It was kind of like a hard thing to come to realize. And I say that, and at the same time too, it's so funny. I also have this temperament though. I'm the kind of person who's never shied away from emotional pain or from discomfort or from fear, at an internal level. Like, I mean, I was a chicken person when I don't know if I can curse, but I was a chicken when I was growing up. And I was afraid of everything on a physical level, but internally, I was never afraid to go there. And I'm still that person. And I'm that person with my clients. Like, I always say that I'm the queen of sacred discomfort. And I say, like, if you really are someone who is willing to sit and listen and observe and love, even in the midst of the pain, remembering that no matter what, you are going to be okay. You got you. I got you. This life has you. If you're willing to go there, it can change. And because that's how I felt. And for a long time, I didn't even have support because I didn't understand the importance. I have support now. Like, and I know there are days where if I feel like, for example, if I'm ever doing introspection and I touch a point that I know I can't fully get there, I'm like, I need someone outside of myself to guide me there. That's why I like guides and coaches and mentors and therapists, because there's only so much I can do on my own. But for a very long time, I was trying to do it all on my own, and it just it prolonged the process. Plus, it also gave me a way of sidestepping certain things. It gave me a way of like dodging the things that I thought would be like, oh no, that's too re-traumatizing, I'm not going to go there. And it's a very nuanced conversation. I think we need like 5 hours to get into this, because it's such a nuanced speak. We want to be able to hold the possibility of yes and for ourselves. Like, yes, this is going to be painful. Yes, it's going to be uncomfortable. Yes, we're going to need a lot of support, and yes, we're going to need someone to ground us, and yes, we're going to need new tools and new systems, and yes, those things can change. And it's one step at a time. It's literally one breath at a time, even not even one step, but one breath at a time, because there are days where you do want to step back, and there are days where you no, don't go there right now, you're not ready for it. And there are days where you need to just be very gentle and loving with yourself, because the thing is that you're right. We play the blame game a lot with ourselves, especially when it's happened to us. It's happened to us, by the way. It's not as if we made it happen. One of the things that drives me most crazy in the spiritual community, because I'm a spiritual girly, like I call myself a priestess. I'm priestess trained. Like, I'm a spiritual woo person, but I cringe when I say stuff like that, because one of the things that drives me most crazy in this world is when people say like, oh, well, you attract these things to you. And I'm like, I
Oh,
I
Safa,
could
agree.
punch someone.
Yeah,
It
yeah.
I
That's like adding trauma to trauma.
oh, it
Unbelievable.
I'm like sweating just saying
Unbelievable.
that.
Me
Just
too.
sweating
I'm
saying that.
sweating hearing you say that because it just makes me so you have no idea the pain these people are under,
It's
and the mixed
terrible.
feelings. And then to add that is
It's
just
terrible.
horrible.
You can't say that. Or the whole like just let it go thing. Ooh. I
Yeah,
listen.
that too. Mm.
I think we
Yeah.
need to get better versed as humans at having conversations that hold the possibility of more. Understand our psychological existence, our neural pathways, we barely are scratching the surface of them. Okay. Nobody knows the everything, the end all be all of everything for how this works. So we can say, we can't just be like, oh, no, like, are we walking paths that are similar and familiar to us because this is all we have known? Yes. And that is not our fault. It's not about blaming. Are we looking for the consistency of the thing that we have known for a while? Yes, but that is not our fault. And it's not that we are making it happen. Like anyway, the point is, before I get on a diatribe, because I can, and it makes me very angry, but before I go there, it's the point is that we want to know that the healing journey is going to invite the possibility of sitting with this very uncomfortable thing and going beyond that for our sake, not for the sake of letting go, and not for the sake of forgiveness. Man, forgiveness is another one that also I'm like, I hear what you're saying, and I'm not going to forgive. Like,
It's not that easy.
No. And you don't owe your forgiveness to anybody either. Like, this is a thing that we grant. Forgiveness and trust are both granted, not earned. So these are conversations that we need to be having, especially in the trauma space, because we deserve it, because we deserve better. We deserve the space to know, man, I'm blaming myself for something that is not my fault. And I want to reframe that. And I want to see a way through. And I don't think I can right now. And right now, this feels so final and so complete that I feel like it's going to tear me to pieces and destroy me completely. And even in presence of that, I want to walk through that underworld. I want to walk through that fire. And I want to believe that there is going to be a way out. And sometimes that belief isn't even there, other than I just want to believe that it's there. And someday it becomes palpable, and someday it becomes your truth, and someday you make it out. Okay. If this feels shame-filled, tell me more about that. Like, let's have a conversation with that, so that we know what the link is that we can hit with that chisel and hammer to break yourself free from those chains. And it is very possible. I see it on a daily basis. But yeah, I would say start there, and also start knowing that no one is expecting perfection of you, and that no one is expecting for you to break free like in 2 seconds. And if you are expecting that, it's okay, because we all do. And it's just a reminder. It's okay, I did expect that. It didn't quite happen. Okay, that's fine. I'm not back at zero. I'm not a failure. I didn't mess up. Because that's the thing about healing, especially healing from trauma. We think that a lot. We think, man, I thought I was doing so much better, and now here I am again having the same conversations or doing the thing again. And it's like, that's just more shame and more guilt. Pause for a moment and recognize, yeah, you're moving in that direction, but you have a history that is being changed and transformed, and you have to step one step at a time, one little bit at a time. Everything is going to be slowly changing. It's slow and steady wins the race, though, and it will happen.
So what I hear you saying is identify that you have these feelings, put it out into the universe, ask more questions, and the answers will become more clear.
Yeah, absolutely.
I love that. Banging your head against the wall, trying to navigate the complexities of a relationship impacted by childhood trauma, it doesn't have to be this daunting. When you're married to a partner with unresolved childhood trauma, it can feel like you're walking on eggshells, never quite knowing what will set them off. No matter what you try, it feels like there's always something triggering another emotional response that seems completely out of context. And the harder you try to fix it, the more discouraged you feel. So what's the issue here? Navigating marriage with a trauma survivor is different. The love languages don't work. Date nights don't work. Self-help books don't help. But here's the good news. I've created something that does work. Something built from years of hard-earned lessons and real-life experience. Ready to take the first step toward real change? Let's talk. I'm offering a free one-on-one call where we'll dive into what's going on in your relationship and figure out a way forward together. This isn't just another quick chat. It's a chance to finally be heard, to share what you're going through with someone who truly gets it. No judgment, just real support. So if you're ready to start making sense of it all and find a little more peace in your marriage, book your free call now. Your happiness, your peace, and your relationship are worth it. Let's do it together.
That I didn't know still needed to be done. I was blinded by, I thought all our problems were around his problems, and I was carrying trauma. I was being triggered by things. I needed to figure out how to recognize my own triggers from my trauma from my past, from my trauma from my past relationships. And that was not something I could see without, without a professional telling me or someone else saying, hey, but don't forget you have these triggers and you react. I get very reactive. Part of it, one thing I learned about my triggers, and it's so important to know ourselves and why something shows up. So when you think back to my, the explosion, I had girls, young girls, 10 to 13 running around screaming. And so when kids would play in that screaming kind of play, it was like nails on a chalkboard for me. It sent me to a place where I would feel reactive. I didn't always yell or whatever, but I could not tolerate it. And I never really understood why until just a few years ago, actually. I finally had my aha moment of, oh, that's why that drives me crazy, because it brings me right back to my trauma. But there's a lot of things that were triggered and we can't define them. And so until we can, I can't tell my husband, okay, so when we're in this situation, I get triggered and this is what I need to feel safe. This is what I need from you to help me feel safe. It's not you. I don't want to be reactive. I don't want to have a heightened emotion or say or do something that I regret because I'm reactive. I want you to understand. And now my kids are starting to understand because I have the words for it now, because I've learned how to see that in myself. Like, oh, that's a trigger. And oh, I need this from you, right?
That's the thing that I work on a lot with partners of someone who's had a traumatic experience, is that the trauma survivor often can't put words to that piece, to what's happening and what's making them reactive to things. And so helping partners identify it. So when the reaction is out of proportion to the situation, just noting that and thinking, I wonder if this is a trigger, if it's something that's coming deep from within that is causing this reaction, and separating them from that. Because if the partner can also help with that process and help to identify, I wonder if there's something else going on here, I think it helps the trauma survivor eventually put words to it.
Completely, because otherwise you're just adding trauma to more trauma to a trigger to a because if your partner's getting triggered because they think the reaction is about them and then they get reactive, it just doesn't help. But figuring out how we can calm ourselves, what works for us, explaining that to your spouse, and go, when this happens, I need help. This is what I need. I need a safe space. So like for me, if we're watching a movie and there's like him and I were watching Yellowstone together, and after, I don't even know how many episodes, but there was a house explosion.
I think it's like the first season, isn't it?
It is the first
episode. Yeah.
I think I got through like the first 3 episodes. I can't remember, but there was the house explosion.
Yes.
Someone running out on fire. And I said, I'm out. And he goes, but it's a really good story. And I go, I can't.
Sorry.
I just know my boundaries, and he knows how to respect them, and he gets it, and he changes the channel. So something like that is on, because he always has the remote. He knows, and he changed channel. Even if someone is being tortured, I can't handle that either. I know that about myself. I just know that about myself because in so many instances in my treatments, I felt tortured. So I can't handle that. And not that my husband loves watching those things either, but sometimes things will come up as you're in the middle of something or something's on in the background. He knows me well enough to know that's my trigger, and he will change it before I get heightened. And I think there's such a gift in that. And it used to be like shame or just even digging into, oh, I have triggers. There's something wrong with me. I'm weak or something. How come I can't handle this? It's so important to be honest with yourself and to be strong enough in who you are, just to say, matter of fact, this triggers me and I don't need to go down that road and I don't want to take you with me. So this is what I need for you to protect us from some volatile, disturbing situation that we don't need to go down.
I do think that there is some shame associated with being triggered.
Mm.
And it comes out in interesting ways in relationships, that like where you're deflecting maybe on the partner or making it seem like it's their fault because of the deep down, again, I can't put words to it, shame that you're feeling that you're still having those reactions or that you're having those reactions.
Yeah.
Is that something you experienced?
Yeah. And I experienced shame from hiding. I experienced shame from people's reactions, from people staring at me, from people like there's so much and shame, and why shame grows. I had nothing to be ashamed of, but anytime we are feeling judged in any way, shame pops up, right? And that's a place for it to grow. So for me, talking about it erases the shame. And when I can talk about it with confidence and a full understanding about how I feel, why this is important to me, where there's no questions about it, around it, and I'm just matter of fact, there is no shame. This is just the facts, Jack, and this is what I need, right? And that's having confidence around it, but we have to sit in it ourselves. We have to understand the why. We have to understand, be able to process, what it is that works, what it is that doesn't work. And so ignoring the situation isn't going to help. It's learning about it and then having the confidence around it to be able to share it and erase the shame and just go, here's the facts.
I think that is so important because that's exactly what I learned as well, is that if you can just take the emotion out of that reaction and just say, I don't think I think there's something else going on here.
Mm-hmm.
But let's take a break and let's think about it.
Right.
And then you really do just get to the facts. You're starting to get to, okay, that I think this is happening because of whatever. And sometimes I have had to learn that sometimes you never know. There isn't words to be put to it. It was a reaction, and it's okay to not know that, what the reason is or the why of it happening, just knowing that it does, and then being able to work on it in a healthier way.
Mm-hmm. And when you have that open conversation and your spouse is your safe space, sometimes you don't, and you've worked through some of those things enough together, you don't have to have the words to it. They can just look at you, or you have a signal. It could be one word. It could be a hand gesture, something where they know, got it, we're out. What do you need? I'm here. Then they know exactly what to do, because just like, you do a fire drill at home. What do you do? If there's a fire, what do you do? It's the same kind of thing. A trigger drill, if I can get it out.
Yeah.
And you do that with your spouse, and you talk about what you need, and they know, they finish your sentence for you. And that's love. Like, that's what love needs to look like, is that understanding, that no judgment. I got you, that you're in a safe space. And then you can discuss it later once you get through the trigger, and you can kind of talk through it a little bit more. But we have this false idea of what love should look like. And we put a lot of responsibility on that other person to innately know all about us. That's very selfish, and it doesn't work. So
Tell me about when in this time cycle that the beauty pageant came into play.
2021 is when I got the reign, and then
Okay.
when I won the title. But it was one of those things I needed to do, to a gift I gave that little girl in me, because she always wanted to be on the Miss America stage and knew that I would never, because of my scars. So I healed that little girl, and I celebrated the woman that I became through all of the hard work I've done to heal, my broken spirit, and that warrior in me triumphed that day, and it was fantastic.
How much do you think your husband had to play in you getting to that point where you're like, I deserve this. I am somebody who who everybody can see now that I do deserve this, and that there is this beauty from within.
Well, he saw it before I did. And he has always been on board with any dream that I have, as I have been on board with his. And in previous relationship, I heard things like, well, we can't afford that, or you can't do that. You know, I heard all the can'ts. And after a week of knowing him, I had an idea. I wanted to help other burn survivors. And I had this idea. He's like, let's make it happen. And we had nothing. We had very little. And he's like, we'll just raise money. It's fine. And he helped me put on events and do stuff. So he doesn't, I can't is not in his vocabulary. And mostly because of his trauma and his, you know, his hard life, his hard upbringing, some of the things that he had to deal with. It made him a warrior too. And we met in that warrior spirit. And he just, without his support, I know I wouldn't have had the confidence to accomplish everything that I have.
I want everybody to hear that this is the type of relationship that everyone deserves.
Yeah.
And it isn't easy,
Mm-mm.
especially if you've had a traumatic past. And doing the work and continuing to work on it in a relationship, it can be done, and it can be amazing. And I want everybody to hear that, who's just going through the motions in survival mode, think that there's no way out.
Yeah.
There really is.
When you value yourself, you can make anything happen.
Here, I can either run away, which is what my nervous system was telling me to do, or I can stay and figure it out and give my daughter at that point the mama that she deserves. Because she wasn't asked to be born. She didn't ask to be born. She didn't ask to be put into a situation. And while I wanted to run as fast as my legs could carry me away from it, because my nervous system perceived danger, she was just an innocent little baby.
I think that motherhood and then, romantic relationships are something that can be difficult because of those coping mechanisms that you use to survive your childhood. End up, if you don't identify it and work on it, they could impact how you mom and how you are in intimate relationships. Let's just start with being a mom. And you've already touched on some of them, but how did some of those coping mechanisms come to play that you were like, I really would like to do this better?
Yeah, so for me, when my kids were really little, my nervous system couldn't handle loud sounds. And, babies can't control their crying as much as, and they can't, they have no means of communicating in a more calm way.
Yep.
Their cries are it's the only way God gave them to communicate. But my nervous system couldn't handle it. Their cries and their screams in infancy, in the toddler era, was a lot for my body, for my nervous system to handle. And there were days when they'd be losing their mind with a temper tantrum or crying or being inconsolable. And they just needed mommy to co-regulate with them, and I couldn't. I physically could not fulfill that need because I couldn't regulate. I didn't have the skills to regulate. And so a lot of my focus now in mamahood after trauma is trigger recovery. Because I realized a few years ago when my son was having a meltdown, and when he gets frustrated, he screams. And his scream is so high pitched, it will make your back hair stand on end. And I was trying to help him. I was trying to, tell mommy what's wrong and so I can help you. And nothing was working. And it got to the point where my nervous system was fritzed. And I lost my patience and I kicked my laundry room wall. Didn't mean to kick it hard, but I made a hole in the wall. And then I looked at the wall and I was like, crap. I shouldn't have done that. That was the wrong way to handle it. So now I've got to fess up to my husband. Hey dear, I kicked a hole in the wall. Oops, sorry.
Yeah.
But then I also have to explain to my son, you know what? Mommy overreacted. And I shouldn't have kicked a hole in the wall. And maybe I raised my voice too. At this point, I can't remember. And I'm sorry if that was scary. Mommy was feeling, insert feeling, unheard. And it wasn't your fault. It was just mommy feeling frustrated. And I'm sorry that it scared you. And I've made apologizing to my kids when my nervous system gets the better of me a regular practice. My kids can learn emotional intelligence and how to apologize with me. We can do it together. But my ability to understand my triggers and work through them hugely impacts how I show up for my kids.
What does it feel like when that triggers? Is it emotional? Does it come from deep within? Is it hard to describe?
When I get triggered, it feels my chest gets tight. I feel like I'm going to crawl out of my skin and I can't function. I can't focus. I can't so giving my hands something to do is helpful. Focusing on bringing myself back to the present with breathing, with affirmations. Because when I first started out on my journey, when I would get triggered, I love hoodies. And so when I was really early on in my postpartum days, I was living in a hoodie. So I pull my hood up, pull the drawstrings so tight that all you could see was the end of my nose, and I would curl up in a ball and I would plug my ears. So I was reducing the sound, I was limiting my visual stimulation. I was in a ball and nobody could touch me because I needed to get my body regulated. That's what it's taken for me to heal my nervous system, because it was not in good shape at all.
In your relationship, I feel like the same things are occurring that were happening, with being a mom, and that you had triggers that you had to explain, or you had to regulate yourself in your relationship as well. What were some of those that were impacting your relationship?
My relationship with my husband has been one where he's been incredibly supportive. Meanwhile, I am petrified that he's going to abandon me. Like, why would he stay? And so I, for the first while after our daughter was born, I struggled with all of these fears and the trauma freight train, as I refer to it, on my own, because I thought that it made me a horrible person, a horrible mom, and that if he knew how I felt, he was going to leave. And so, in order to maintain my relationship and not be abandoned, I had to zip it and suck it up. And he knew something was up, but I wouldn't tell him.
When did you realize if I don't start telling him why some of these things are happening, this is going to go sour? Were you able to just kind of figure that out over time?
Well, I opened up to him. It was a rainy Saturday, and I was like, oh, fine. This is either going to go terribly wrong or he's going to, just be amazing. And, the assumptions that I made about him leaving and abandoning, those were of my own creation. He had done nothing to indicate that he was going to up and leave. Nothing. And so I told him, and he was like, okay, how do we fix this? I was like, wait, what?
Did you think you were like, he's going to leave if he knows?
Yeah. I had convinced myself that I needed to zip my lip and, power through, or he was going to leave and I was going to be abandoned with a baby and have to figure it out for myself.
So that was the moment when you started to realize I can say some of these things out loud.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah.
He's my safe place now. Between him and my journal, my safe place.
An incredible conversation. If there's one thing today's episode proves, it's that healing isn't just possible, it's powerful. Danette, Cassandra, Emily, and Safa, they brought raw honesty, deep wisdom, and practical tools that can truly change the way we approach trauma, relationships, and connection. So I'm hoping that some of you may have seen yourself in Danette's story, where learning to set boundaries and breaking free from codependency and embracing self-worth, or Cassandra's insights helped you realize that healing isn't just about getting therapy, it's about finding what actually works for you. Emily's story showed us that our triggers don't have to be our downfall. They can be the start of deeper understanding with the people that we love. And Safa reminds us of something so important, that the way we talk about trauma and healing matters. We all have the power to create more understanding, more compassion, and more connection. And that's what this show is all about. So what's your next step? Maybe it's having a conversation that you've been avoiding. Maybe it's looking at your own healing with fresh eyes, or maybe it's simply just knowing that you're not alone in this journey. No matter where you are, you deserve healing, you deserve connection, and you deserve peace. Thanks for joining today.
All right, that's a wrap for today on Love and Trauma, the real deal. Big thanks to my guests for sharing their insights. Couldn't have done it without you. Now, for those of you looking to take this journey further, I've got something special. Head to my website to grab Real Tactics, Real Healing, a survivor's playbook for navigating a relationship with a trauma survivor. It's packed with everything you need to know, do, and say to navigate the emotional minefield, find your balance, and regain your self-worth and happiness.